Welcome back to another episode of Life's Ambition Podcast. I wanted to take a quick second to thank everyone who listens and supports the show. I know this is a long time coming, but I hope everyone has had a great few holidays and hope 2025 is a year of pursuing your passions. Today we are joined by someone who has pursued their dreams. She's going to give her input on becoming a COO for an investor real estate company. Without further ado, Leslie Cohen. Leslie, how's it going?
Great. How are you, Drew?
I'm doing very good. It's another sunny day in North Carolina, so can't complain with that.
Awesome.
Do you guys get snow there yet in Boston, or?
We did get a little bit last week.
Nice. Nice.
Yep.
I think if it snowed here, everything would shut down. And be very
Yeah.
honest, I think at one point during my undergrad year, there was like maybe an inch of snow, and people were still driving full speed on the highway. Cars were turned around. I'm not even making this up. I was coming back from a hockey game, and cars were literally just turned around in ditches. It was just like, what is happening
Yeah.
right now? So I totally get that.
Yeah.
Get that. But I'd love to get to know you a little bit more and see, how did you become into this engineering background for yourself?
Yeah. So I actually I originally thought I wanted to be a doctor. And so when I went to college, my parents said, you need to pick a degree that you can get a job in, and just doing a biology or a chemistry degree is not going to land you a job. So think about engineering. It's similar prerequisites for the pre-med, and you'll end up with a degree that you can actually go get a job in if you decide not to keep going. So that's really how I got into it. I didn't have a lifelong passion to be an engineer, but I ended up with a bachelor's in civil engineering from Tufts.
Gotcha. And speaking of like civil engineering, I know a lot of people in that field right now. Is there mostly a market for it in terms of, like, I guess, real estate, which is what you're in now, or do a lot of people find it in terms of, I guess, construction of different pipelines? Like, what kind of opportunities are available like in this field?
Yeah, I think there's a wide range. There's definitely kind of large, heavy civil projects, right, which are more of pipeline projects, highways. Those tend to be more public roles and public positions, working for cities and states. There's also, what I did was, I was a civil engineer, basically working for clients who are like the firm that I am at now, or have spent most of my career at, working on the civil engineering design for various development projects. So that could be anything, I've done it for anything from a CVS pharmacy to Legoland in California, designing their parking lot and their drainage systems, to, all of the civil work that's involved in, any urban project as well.
And I would love to get to that in a little bit, but how come you never, I know studying biology or chemistry can be tougher to find a position outside of school, and you stuck with civil engineering. Did you ever think after your years of college, like, hey, maybe I still want to go that medical route at all?
You know what? It changed when I did my first internship at this really fantastic design firm based in Boston named Sasaki Associates. And it was really my first exposure to, the built environment. And I worked on, a golf course in Aruba. I worked on the Legoland project. Like, I worked on some really incredible land planning and kind of career type projects that were really exciting. And, I thought, hey, listen, maybe this is something that I could see myself doing. I think also by the time I finished school, I think I was ready to be done and didn't see myself kind of keep going. But my interest was piqued at Sasaki. And so I interned there for a couple of summers and then ended up working there full time after I graduated.
Awesome. And how important do you think it is to have those opportunities while you're in school? Because I know for me, when I was kind of navigating my own path, I learned enough in the classroom to, I guess, give me a broad knowledge of things. But I think those real world applications in terms of your internships, like, I had an opportunity with the Forest Service, and then there was some research on campus that really allowed me to dive into the GIS world. And that's kind of what exposed me to a lot of today and now what I deal with. So how important would you say having that Sasaki internship was for you?
Very important. I mean, I agree with you, Drew. I think there's only so much you learn in a classroom, and part of doing internships is to find out what you like and what you don't like, what you think you want to do, or maybe you thought you wanted to do it, and then find out you actually really don't. So,
Hmm.
and also you just start to learn how to work in an office environment, which is a whole different set of skills than what you learn in college.
Yeah. What was probably the biggest learning curve when you went to Sasaki, like even after your internships? Was it more of the applied applications of everything from the class, or was it more of, wow, I wish I kind of learned this aspect?
Yeah, I think it was like the real world application of the theory that I learned in college, right? I didn't put to use a lot of what, I took thermodynamics and a number of physics classes, and, none of that really came in handy and when doing what I was doing. So I think it was basically learning, taking what I learned and then applying it to real world problem solving and solutions for clients.
And well, how does that, like, for what you guys did there in terms of land planning, is it more or less the same as urban planning?
Yeah, there was an urban planning group there. So, depending on the type of project, there might be an urban planner on the project. There might be, there'll be a civil engineer, there'll be a landscape architect, an architect on the project as well.
Hmm.
So, it was really a multidisciplinary firm.
Gotcha. And what was like your role? Because you said you were a land planner, but there were all these different, I guess, options to you, where there was architect, you said urban planner, there's all these different people. Were you strictly just one or the other, depending on the project?
Yeah, I mean, I was a civil engineer on the project, so I really
Got
was doing the design of the site for whatever it was going to be.
it.
So the grading and the drainage and the pavement design, and which could be anything ordinary to anything really upscale and sophisticated. That would be done in partnership with the landscape architect. So, but really, the civil engineer is designing kind of the ground plane.
Okay. And how often are you working then with the customer and other regulators? Because I'm sure all the time you're dealing with environmental restrictions, you're also dealing with budget constraints, you're also dealing with what customer actually wants the place to look like and what's actually like feasible. So the architect is coming up with designs and you're like, I don't really know if that works.
Yeah, I mean, listen, as an entry level, you're lucky, right, if you get exposure to the client.
Hmm.
So, when I was starting out, I would say in my early years, I was much more behind the scenes, and there were, I was part of a team, and so, was getting direction internally. Definitely the direction on these types of projects comes from the client, and then they rely on the engineers and the architects to come up with something that meets the budget, that meets all the regulatory compliance, and can actually get built.
And how come entry level engineers don't get that experience where they can't like maybe shadow someone else that is interviewing with the customer itself? Or is it mostly just because there's so much to learn in terms of the regulatory piece that that's just a step later on to worry about?
Yeah, and listen, things may have changed in the 30 years from when I started, but I think, you do need somebody to do the work, right? So when you're starting out, kind of you are doing the work on behalf of the senior people who are kind of setting direction. And then the senior people are the ones, at that time who had the most interaction with the client.
Did this all make you an engineering and training? I know that was like a big thing that I'll see on applications. So people I know who are interviewing for whatever position, they'll be like, hey, like, are you in engineering and training? For me, in my head, that just means, oh, I graduated with an engineering degree. I'm working on getting my professional engineering certification. Or is that completely separate?
There's an exam you take to be an EIT, an engineer in training, and then you have to be an EIT for 5 years before you can become a professional engineer, a PE.
Oh, and what kind of exams are those? Or what's the exam for the engineering and training?
You know what? I would be hard pressed to remember. I honestly don't remember what was on it. I
Yeah.
did take it. I did not get my PE because by the time I was at that mark, I was already kind of moving out of civil engineering.
Gotcha. Because I was gonna say, like, see, it's always funny when you look at entry level positions for whether it's on LinkedIn or Indeed, it'd be like, hey, like we want you to be an engineering and training, and then other applications would be like, hey, we want you to have like 5+ years of this experience, and so that makes more sense. I want now when you say that
Yeah.
timeline of they want you to become a professional engineer at that
Yeah.
point. And is there any benefit of having these certifications
Yeah.
or
So PE, you can stamp drawings. So
stamp drawings? Okay,
yeah.
what does that entail?
You basically are certifying that everything is, designed in accordance to code. And it's required when you go in and permit projects, you have to have stamp drawings from the engineer of record.
Oh, so what you guys made design. So like, let's say you had your internship with Sasaki and you're developing or designing what you said for helping out with Legoland. You would give those drawings or designs to a professional engineer and they would stamp off on it. Is
Yeah, I
that
mean,
kind of where I'm getting?
on the team, there's a professional engineer who's overseeing the work and they're reviewing and checking the work. And then when they're comfortable with it, they're stamping it that it's been designed in accordance with all the codes and can be filed for a permit.
Gotcha. For engineering and training or trainees, then, do they get any more, I guess, leeway in terms of or I guess more overlook on the drawings than just someone who just graduated and is just a regular engineer?
The PE has to review everything that's prepared and to stamp it. So it
Okay.
doesn't matter whether you're 1 year out or whether you're an EIT, everything has to be reviewed and approved by the PE before they stamp it.
With your experiences, did you need the engineering and training certification?
I took it because it was the right thing to do. If at the time when I thought I might stay in civil engineering, I think I pretty quickly figured out that that was not going to be my lifelong passion. And so that's why I didn't pursue the PE.
Okay. So then what led you to today, I guess? What led you to more of the planning piece and becoming a COO?
Yeah, so like I said, I realized fairly quickly that my lifelong passion was not to design drainage systems and parking lots and grading of sites. And so what I did learn along the way though was that the people that we were working for, the clients, were mostly real estate developers. And so I felt like I had strong project management skills and so wanted to try to see if I could move to the owner side and work for a developer. So at the time, I was like, I don't know, 26 or something, 27. And I was not from Boston. I was really not very well networked. I was also female, which is a very male dominated industry. And after about a year of applying, I did not get a job at any developer. I didn't have enough experience. Like I said, I wasn't known and I didn't have a network. And so I ended up going to Staples and for about 2 years, and I worked in their real estate department. In their architecture and engineering group. I oversaw new store development and existing store renovations. And so I decided while I was there, I was going to just try to learn the whole process of development from the side of a retailer, and just learn as much as I could from everybody who participated, the real estate managers, the lawyers. And I also decided that if I really wanted to kind of continue and really make my way to the owner side, I needed financial skills that I did not get in college and did not get while I was on the job as an engineer. So I decided to pursue my MBA. So I pursued that in the evenings. And then about halfway through my MBA, I was introduced from a former client of mine to a company, Samuels and Associates, where I ended up spending the next 20 years of my career there. And I started as a development manager, basically managing projects, and I was a developer. I then kind of worked my way up and co-led the development department there. And then in 2015, I became the chief operating officer and moved out of development and into the operations role of overseeing the operations side of the business and running the day-to-day business.
I think that's really cool that it was a client that referred you over to Samuel and Associates Group. So it's kind of like a little bit all by chance. And did you work with this client for a really long time to where like you guys developed kind of like almost a friendship? And then when the time came around, here's this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, he was a civil engineer as well who had moved to the developer side. And so I think I had probably talked to him about how he did that. His firm had partnered with the firm that I ended up going to. And so when he heard that they were looking for somebody, he thought of me and said, you know what, you should meet these guys and talk to them. And they were also looking for people with a background in civil engineering, not to do engineering because the role was really to oversee the engineers, oversee the architects, oversee the contractors. But the working knowledge of civil engineering proves to be a good background to have.
And with your time at Staples and almost becoming that project manager there and overseeing kind of some of the sites that were being built, did it make it a very easy transition then to just go over to Samuel and Associates? I already have this experience, and then now I can kind of move my way up.
Yeah, I mean, it showed them that I had project management experience. I will say that the project management at Staples was very different than the project management at Samuels. Like Staples, most of the Staples buildings were being built by developers, so I really was just watching them, kind of overseeing their timeframes and making sure that projects were staying on track. Versus when I was, a development manager for a developer, I was really the one who was like, managing the project day to day and responsible for keeping it on track, responsible for advancing the design and the permits and construction. So it definitely got my foot in the door that I had project management experience. I had a very steep learning curve when I started at Samuels, though.
Yeah. Did your mindset shift at all between becoming the engineer to the developer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the engineer was not a good fit for me, right? I was looking for like bigger picture and like broader scope. And so working for a developer made sense. And so it was more aligned to what I was interested in doing. It wasn't such a narrow focus.
Well, because what does that entail on the developer side? I know you said like you're making sure everything is going on schedule and you're working or you're getting the permits and all that stuff done. But are you just basically the overseer of everything?
Yeah, pretty much. And again, like I started at a more entry level position and then worked my way up. But, by the time, I was kind of co-running the development group, I was a project executive. So I was running those projects from start to finish, everything from, negotiating to buy the land to hiring the architects and engineers, working internally with our team and our founder on like, what's the vision of this project? But once that had been aligned, getting the team on board to design it, go into the municipality and get it permitted, work with neighbors to make sure they're on board with it and they would support it. And then ultimately, once it's approved, working with our construction team, getting a contractor on board, getting it built and then delivering it to our team that then runs the operations of it.
And what was the hardest part of that process? Would it be getting, I guess, approval from others? Would it be, I don't know, public support? I don't know how much public support plays a factor into it. Getting the permitting itself? Because I know it can take a really long time to make sure everything is properly regulated. So what would you say is probably the hardest part?
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest part is like there's always some fire to fight, so to speak, right? I think once you understand the lay of the land in terms of how to get something permitted, if you establish good relationships, build trust, like getting the project entitled, it can happen. It just takes time and you have to be very thoughtful and strategic. I think in general, being, a project executive, I think the biggest challenge there is just like there's always something that comes up that needs to be resolved along the way, and so it just feels constant. But that's can be the fun of it as well.
Oh, very much so, because it's almost like you're playing chess with yourself, but you're also like creating a puzzle at the same time
Yeah.
because you have all the moving parts.
Yeah.
And I spoke with Daniel Howe. He was on a recent episode, and he talked a lot about how you have to have patience when it comes to a lot of these different permitting processes, working with others. And if you're not very patient, then it's not a good field to go into in terms of planning. But if you are, the end result is probably the most rewarding aspect. And would you say when it's all said and done, like when you help develop Legoland and all these different places, whether it's even just Staples in general, helping out with them, was it kind of like a sigh of relief, like this one's done?
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, it's always fun to see, something that's a concept on paper and then see it, in the built environment. So I think that's very rewarding.
And how do you guys like help mitigate? So let's say you're developing a project in the city or maybe in some residential area. How do you guys help mitigate traffic, but also help improve it once it's all said and done? Whether it's like adding roundabouts, is this all part that you guys have to think about in terms of developing side and the project management side, or is it mostly the city that helps give their input to you guys, like, hey, this is what's gonna help best?
No, I mean, as part of a project that you're entitling, there are traffic engineers on the project that evaluate what is the impact by adding this project to the roadway
Hmm.
and how do you mitigate it. And so there, through the design process, there's a number of different alternatives, and then you have to work iteratively with the city or town, on what's acceptable to them, and make sure that you have alignment on that.
Gotcha. Because I was always curious about that in terms of how much you guys have a say in what happens in terms of like the traffic mitigation. Because there was have you ever heard of Bucky's?
No.
So it's this like giant duplex where it's a convenience store, there's a gas station, and I want to say there's a car wash with it, but I'm not overly sure. And they're scattered out throughout the southeast. So like if you drive down towards South Carolina or Georgia, there'll always be one off the highway. There's like 100 signs leading to it. And they were going to develop one in North Carolina. I forgot the exact location, but it was going to take up, it was, I want to say over 108, or not 108, but like it was like 50 acres of land. And I'm just thinking like that's a huge project. So how do you guys, even for something at that large of a size, how do you even just kind of plan in your head to make sure the outcome works for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, in general, to develop, you need to mitigate your impacts. So whether that's from a drainage perspective, a groundwater perspective, traffic. So you hire consultants, a lot of different types of engineers, right, to help work on that. So that when you present something, to the community and to the municipality, it's in compliance with the what's required from a regulatory standpoint, and you're mitigating your impacts.
Gotcha. And not to totally sidetrack, but what made you choose more the management role over becoming a specialist in the civil engineering? I know you said you kind of stirred away from it, but how did you kind of come to the realizations like I like being on the management role and becoming a COO?
Yeah, I mean, the project management was just something that I was interested in and felt like I would be good at. I didn't like being an engineer. I didn't like sitting behind a computer, crunching numbers and calculations all day long.
Yeah.
I wanted more interaction with people, with clients, ultimately managing people. It just wasn't something that I ended up in engineering. I didn't love it, but it became a good background to have
Hmm.
for me to, pave a pathway to becoming a developer. And then, I really was just at my firm long enough as a developer. And I also, in my MBA, in addition to gaining financial acumen, I also took a lot of organizational development classes, which really have to do with kind of how things run, how businesses run, and how people operate effectively and efficiently. And so, I kind of used that, which I actually really enjoyed those classes. And had the longevity at my company where nobody else really had the interest in kind of taking on the COO role.
Sweet, because I know it's very hard to get to that point, especially when you're competing against the free market and so many others. Like, how did you continue to, I know obviously you took all these classes, you worked on getting your MBA, but how did you continue to just mark it up? Because a lot of people could have the same thing you do in terms of MBA, lots of years of experience in something. How did you market yourself? And like you said, as a woman in a male dominated field, how did you manage to compete with everyone else and exceed to become a COO?
Yeah, well, first of all, I worked with the firm I was at, it was a great firm and great partners. And became a partner in 2011. I was the only female partner. But I worked with a bunch of great men who were, really supportive, and we had a great partnership. I think, how did I get there? It really was just through hard work and through doing more than was actually on my job description. So, I might have just been at one point a development manager, but I was always looking for ways to, improve processes within the organization and efficiency within the organization. And, that wasn't part of my job, but I just kept reaching up, and I had a great boss who allowed me to, and I did more than was asked, and tried to over deliver as much as possible.
No, I think that's absolutely amazing that you did more than what was expected, because it's like my dad, he always talks a lot about how someone asks you to do something, make sure you stay however many hours and make sure you work on it, because that time and tail will carry on for a very long time, and they'll remember that. Because for him, as a physical therapist, he would open and close several clinics, so he'd work way more than 40 hours a week. But it got him to where the point he is today, where he can kind of take a step back and just kind of enjoy things. And so for you, hearing that, it only just emphasizes that point even more, is like, work as hard as you can, because it will pay off at one point or another.
Yes. Yep.
But for you, how does your position relate to the CEO, CFO, CIO? Are you working in tandem with all of them, or?
Yeah. So, the CEO, typically a CEO role is the one who sets strategic direction. The COO is the one who integrates and executes the strategy and the ideas. The CFO is responsible for the financial integrity of the firm and financial planning for the firm. And the CIO is responsible for, investing, driving really the business, right? Whether that's, finding sites to develop, investments to invest in, et cetera. That's kind of how those different functions integrate with each other.
Well, you talked a lot about efficiencies before. Like, do you like exploiting you liked exploiting inefficiencies to make it more efficient throughout the company when you're at Samuel and Associates? So it makes even more sense than why you became the COO.
Yes, exactly.
Now, why did you switch over to Davis?
I had been at Samuel's for a long time. 20 years is a long time to have a job in one place. And I was ready to learn something new. Davis is an investment management firm. So slightly different than a developer like I had been at. And so I've learned the fund management business. Is a great way to kind of keep growing professionally, and to kind of take a lot of the skills that I had learned and put in place at Samuel's and bring those here and help drive the same kind of processes and efficiencies within the organization here.
Well, what does that mean then to be an investment management firm?
So we raise money and then invest it in real estate. Yeah.
So, and is this real estate as in homes, townhomes, multifamily complexes, apartment buildings?
It's all commercial real estate. So we specialize in multifamily, industrial, and life science.
And what is that realm looking like now with people working from home? COVID happened. So how has the market changed from before COVID to after? Because you hear a lot about vacant buildings and companies not occupying them anymore. How does it impact your line of work?
So I would say in general, people who own office buildings, this is a tough time, right? I think we are
Hmm.
starting to see more return to work, but the past few years have been challenging with the hybrid and work from home, work remote. Um, we don't specifically own a lot of office, so that's good. But there's a lot of people who do. It's been a challenging few years. On the flip side, that makes for opportunities, right? People are selling, and it allows others the ability to come in and buy. And you're hearing a lot about office to resi conversion. Thinking about how to take that office space and repurpose it another way.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot about even making restaurants just in obviously like on the first two floors or just kind of where it's available.
Yeah,
I always thought that was a really cool idea. Obviously, like you said, to make them into more residential
yeah.
pieces. The Do you guys deal with the repurposing as well, or are you guys solely on the investment side of, okay, here's the funding for building this commercial building or building these homes?
Both. So sometimes we can be in the investor only, and sometimes we can also be the one who is driving, a redevelopment or a development.
Well, this has got to be then a really cool time for you because it does offer different challenges. Like you said, it's a professional growth experience for yourself. And would you say, like, what projects have you been working on recently? Or I don't know if based on the COO role, if you're on maybe the project side, but what would you say is probably some inefficiencies that you're seeing that you'd love to tackle with now this new time of the repurposing aspect, the vacancy in different areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think my focus on efficiency and process is more internal in the organization than on the actual deals per se.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And well, then for yourself within the organization, are you guys dealing with more residential then development, or are you guys still developing a lot in cities? Or I should say, are you guys developing a lot more homes and multifamily complexes rather than commercial buildings?
We're pretty evenly distributed.
Hmm.
We don't do single family homes. We do multifamily.
Sorry, multifamily.
Um, and then, but also are focused on investments in the industrial space. So that's like warehouses, distribution centers, um, and then also in the science and tech space, which can be lab, it can be high tech R&D and the like.
Hmm. Because it's just very interesting for me in terms of the planning realm of how everything works. Just because, yeah, like a lot, there is the repurposing of different areas. There is more people moving out to the suburbs maybe than in the cities. And so I find that very reassuring then that you're getting an even split between the commercial side in terms of the warehouses and then the residential side. Now, for you, what would you say is probably the biggest piece of advice that you could give to someone, because you have worked your way all the way up to the COO position and you're still, I know you've worked plenty of years, but you're still very young in your career. What would you say to someone that may be like, this is my first year, like, how am I going to get to the top?
Yeah, I would say be patient. I think patience is really hard. I know I struggled with it early on. And I think being patient is really important. Like your time will come. You have to put the work in, and you have to learn how to work. You have to learn to be, get really experienced at whatever your craft is, and be patient. Like work for good people, and be patient.
Hmm. And I think that's very good advice because I know for me, at the beginning of my career, it's like, whoa, everyone I know in terms of my family and others is up here, kind of at the management role, upper echelon. And it's like, all right, well, how do I get from there to there? And, you know, my a lot of people I know will talk about how the younger generation, they want it now versus
Yeah.
later. And it's just tough to do that in a sense. So I think what you said about patience is really fitting. Because did you find, how long did it take you to really get to your first management role? I know obviously being in an internship with Sasaki for a few years helps out. How long, or to get you more towards that role, but how long did it take you to get there?
Yeah, probably like 6 years before I was in project management.
6 years, yeah. So I mean that's what I expect, or like hear about a lot, is that it takes half a decade to do that.
Yeah.
Half a decade to do that.
Yep.
But thank you again, Leslie. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for being on the episode today.
Thank you, Drew. Great questions, and thanks for having me.
Of course. Hey everyone, really appreciate you listening to the show today. If you liked the episode, please give the podcast a like or 5-star rating depending on what platform you're listening to. Hope to catch you in the next one.